What's going on, troopers? Welcome to the Trooper Transmission. Today we got Ross coming in to talk all things troopers, fitness, maybe some games. Who knows what you've been up to? But thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to, be on this end of the screen. So,
Yeah, exactly. So I'll hit you with the curveball question first. Who
hmm
or what is your favorite Star Wars character?
Oh, that one's not even a curveball. So, and I didn't even know you were going to ask it, but this is how close it is to my heart. I got one of many Obi-Wan Kenobi miniatures here
Nice.
that I'll be painting. And I don't know if people can tell from here, but I'm going for the sort of, you
Oh,
know, between sequels look. So yeah, it's my
yeah.
yeah, Kenobi's my boy. So
Okay, cool.
yeah,
Favorite Nobi quote then?
I mean, it's you know what it is. Uh, hello there.
There we
So
go. All right. That's
yeah,
that's how you start off. That's how you start off in
yeah,
there. So
yeah.
let's wind the clock back before
hmm
the dark times, before the Empire, or the Dad Mod,
Right.
as we call it. Pretend you're Obi-Wan
hmm
Kenobi here. What was going on in your world that was not where you wanted it to be?
Okay, so we're talking. Okay, so step out. So before the like joining join the
Yeah, before
force. Yeah,
joining Fit Nerd Academy, that
yeah,
before the
yeah,
dark.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I was able to kind of make some change. So I'm 37 now, and throughout my 30s, there's a lot of this sort of oh yeah, I want to get back to this point. Whether it's I was doing this in college or right after college, or just saying, hey, I can take control of my life, so I want to you know make these things along the way. And I made some small strides here and there, like learned a little bit about nutrition, made a couple commitments here and there about things like, I got into rowing for a little while just on an erg in my house, and, tried to track some things in that way. Habits never really stuck though. And it's really easy. And so I, was in a pretty stressful, training for my career. And I think it was really easy to be like, hey, I'm going to value like giving myself grace and allowing myself to, you know, let a couple things slide. But a couple things obviously turns into a lot of things, and then years all pass and you just don't see big changes. And I was kind of tired of trying everything based on just like, oh, I'm gonna do what I always do, which is I'm gonna research, I'm going to find the best way, I'm gonna optimize this, because none of that was sticking. Um, and I saw the first of the um, like promos for the cadet thing on Instagram of just this guy saying like, I've got free workouts where I do stuff in a clone trooper helmet, and it it was really one of those things where it was so out there that I was like, hey, why not? Like that seems funny. Um, and so just sort of like got on the mailing list and did that. But it was another year before I actually decided to join. And that one was where it was like the turning point where I was like, I am tired of feeling burnt out all the time. I'm tired of feeling like a failure every time I try to make a behavioral change. I think that was the big one, was
Mm,
like, oh, I can get things going for a little bit, but none of it's sticking. And every time I try that, it just reinforces this idea. So I was like, I'm going to do something completely different. And I just, was like, hey, I'm going to do this and completely, you know, commit to this, this bit of, being a trooper and
yeah.
taking the alter ego approach. Yep.
You said it. There was something you said in there along the lines of feeling like a failure every single time you started and stopped. And so was that kind of the thing that you were tired of feeling, that when you did fall short, then it would be this reinforcement of, because I think that's what you're getting at, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure I'm not overstating. So for you, it was like, man, I would start this up, start to make a change, wouldn't follow through, and then boom, now I got to hear that voice again saying X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And I think right now I have more of a, more insight into that where I didn't necessarily have that was not a conscious sort of avoidance aspect at that point. Um, but looking back on it, that was definitely sort of the nebulous, ineffable aspect of what was sort of weighing on me was, well, it never seems to stick. And it's just like any other behavioral cycle, you reinforce whatever outcome, you are going through. And so for me, I just had this sort of feeling like it was like walking through mud because it was like every step, I was expecting that sort of just, I'm going to plant my foot next and it's going to get stuck again. I'm going to have to pull myself out of it. So it was really just about breaking the cycle as much as possible. Um, and also just like, saying like, hey, it's not just on me to do this because I think a lot of it was like, I would do a lot of research, do a lot of deep dives, and but I was fully relying on myself. And so I think some element of putting it in a community's hands or putting it in, a coach's hands, um, provide that accountability as well. But it was mostly just about saying, I'm tired of that, like you said, that cycle of every time I try something and don't stick with it, it increases that sense of dread and avoidance the next time I do it. And it built into this point where I just sort of see myself as, oh, I'm just not a guy who can build habits.
Mm. Yeah, totally. And what in your background, because you study a lot of this and do a lot of this work, what what was the thing that ultimately ended up making it stick for you, right? Because to your point, like you do all the research, you go and figure out the most optimal thing, and sometimes that almost gets in the way where it's like, okay, I have this like perfectly constructed thing, and then you're like, oh, things don't always go as planned. The first casualty in battle is the battle plan, is a quote that I heard recently that I really liked. So, what was the thing that like helped you make that shift ultimately?
Yeah. Um, prior to, I mean, there was like kind of one big win, but that was like later in the process, I would say. Um, I think it wasn't about having a big shift. I think it was making small adjustments, but still being committed to like the program, still having check-ins with you, where a lot of times I would be hard on myself and you would actually say like, yeah, man, don't sweat that part. Like you've done this. And so I think pointing out the victories where they were
Mm,
while I was seeing like, oh, here it is again, or yeah, I shot for this and I fell short. I think having, like I said, that check-in, that accountability, first off to reflect on, like for you to reflect back at me, like, well, you know, that happens, that's not atypical, and you know, look at the alternative. Like, so a lot of it was, I stuck with um logging everything on the app like pretty consistently for like the first month or two, like, about like the first 2 months. I think it was around the new year that I started kind of like slipping there. And again, I was like, oh, I'll give myself some grace, whatever. Um and I gave myself a hard time for it, but even you were like, well, it doesn't really matter as long as you're doing the things that and meeting the goals that you want. And so for me, just the fact that I was like working out on a regular basis was losing weight by like watching my nutrition and hitting those goals. Um, I feel like that's the thing that would have previously kind of made me give up on it because I would have just seen that portion, but continuing to show up and kind of say, okay, well, this is one goal, but like the overall goal we're still moving towards, I think helped to kind of course correct anytime I started to spiral. So I think that was the key of building the small victories, which eventually build into larger ones.
yeah. Here's a question for you. How would you now, or maybe in the past versus now, how would you reconcile giving yourself grace versus letting yourself off the hook?
That is a very good question. Um, overall, I think it was a good thing because I think prior to that, there was a lot of guilt and shame around not being able to stick with certain things. I would say, like, especially in my late 20s, I would do something and I would lose a bunch of weight really fast and I would get like really intense about like only eating this, that, or the other, and having these big plans and saying like I'm going to do this every day because why wouldn't I maximize it? And I would see a lot of results, but it would be unsustainable. I would fall off, and it would just there would be a ton of shame around it. And I think I began to have a much more healthy relationship with food, with activity, even though I wasn't where I wanted to be. I was still, you know, moderately able to be active, eat the things that I knew I should be eating. Just not with a ton of intentionality, but I think giving myself grace there was important for kind of having a healthier relationship, a like non-judgmental relationship, I guess. And it was more just once you kind of reconciled that, I think it's all about maturity and your own sort of experiential aspect there. I was then at a point where I was ready to say, now I want to challenge my values, knowing that there isn't going to be judgment. There's just going to be, you know, a sense of wanting to improve, knowing that like perfection isn't the goal. I
Yeah.
think, you know, I needed both those elements of moderation. So I think I had to experience both ends before I was able to like really, dial in.
Yeah, totally. Well said. Because grace is, often find the thing that most people need because they're so hard on themselves because of the failed attempts. And so, for anyone watching this, if you're like, man, I feel really guilty or I feel really bad, like a failure when I do fall short, give yourself grace. You're supposed to fall short, but then also at the same time, not so much grace to the extent where you're like, oh, I had a tough day. I haven't worked out in 4 months, but I need another, month to rest. And so it's like pursue the best version of you, knowing that you're going to fall short, and that's okay because you're a human, you're not a droid, you're going to fall short. And so it sounds like you were able to find that. And what would you say were some of the big wins that looking back over the last several months you can kind of point to where whether it's numerical or just even just a feeling or an experience, what would you say are some of those big wins?
Yeah, so I think they are not the numbers. I will say that. Um, I think the numbers were good just from a sense of early on, especially. At least I would know that I was heading in the right direction, you know? Um, but none of those were the things that actually built motivation and drove me forward. Because early on, um, my main goals, and I didn't really talk about this, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, but I was really more about this idea of sort of bodily autonomy and freedom. I grew up in a forest where it was like we would take out our bikes and we would just stop and be like, I want to climb that tree. And you just do it. Like you don't think beforehand, like, oh man, like I don't know if I have the range of motion for that. And so I just wanted that experience of, if I go to an event and somebody throws a frisbee, that I don't have to think, is my back going to hold up? I'm just going to like run and go grab it or whatever. Or if, I'm looking to have kids in the relatively near future and like I want to be able to like keep up with them. And so it was that sense of not feeling locked into my body. And so it's times when I see that have been the biggest wins for me. Um, there's been some small ones along the way, but then like, just a couple weeks ago, my fiance and I went on a uh, week long hiking trip essentially. And I remember when we would go on hikes, like the month that I started in Fitner Academy, like we did a 7 mile hike and I was like pretty rough at the end of it. I got through, but it was like required some recovery. I was definitely not able to keep pace with her. And we were averaging, you know, 2 weeks ago, we were averaging 8 to 10 miles a day, over, some stuff with like some pretty different, like difficult terrain. And it was just every morning getting up, feeling good, ready to go. And so even though looking in the mirror, I don't see huge changes, and even though the scale is like, better, but not where I'd want it to be, that really was like, okay, that is the outcome that I was wanting, I was looking for, and it gave me this beautiful experience of being able to share this exploration with my fiance, that I wouldn't have been able to handle, 7, 8 months ago, and that is like that's the biggest turning point, I would say.
Yeah, that's the feeling that for a lot of people the numbers are the proxy for, but it's so that
Hmm.
to your point, you can feel almost like a kid again,
Yeah,
right? Like, hey, I
yeah,
want to go climb that. Cool. I'm going to go do that and I have full control over my body to do so.
yeah.
Yeah.
And without getting like full midlife crisis about it, I mean, I think that's what a lot of us feel in so many parts of our lives, right? Like there's this idea of when you're in high school, it's like, oh, you can go anywhere, you can do whatever, like you can be anything you want to be, and even in college, if you go to college, or even if you don't, like you're working jobs, and it's always an idea that you can pivot. And the further we get, the more that society and life tells us, like, stay in your lane. And I think that's why a lot of us have the nerd hobbies that we have, is we like having this um, fantasy of another alter ego, another person who can explore a different world and do all those things. And so that sort of loss of potential of sort of specialization makes your world more narrow. And
Mm.
I think so many of us miss that potential, whether it's from career or traveling or just anything. And and that kind of makes us feel restricted. And I think having that freedom in your body to not feel that same way whenever you're just moving throughout, your day, it's that same feeling in a very visceral way.
Yeah, that's I've never thought of it or articulated it that way or seen it articulated, but it totally is this. You're locked in. This is my life now. But the alter ego, when you're playing a character, is like, oh no, I'm locked in, but this person scales the wall and, takes out the bad guy. And that's it's a really interesting insight. I'd be curious for you, for someone who is, with similar background, similar challenges, what would be your three key points or even just things to focus on? Like, hey, focus on these three things, you'll see a lot of success because there's so many things to focus on. What would you say are
Mhm.
the three big ones for you, for anyone like kind of resonating with your story?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say we'll kind of like try not to muddle through this and try and like dial it into three key points. So a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with are adults who are kind of trying to recapture, or maybe for the first time, uh, you know, establish a level of fitness and habits and all sorts of healthy, sort of lifestyle changes. Um, Coming to an aspect of adult learning theory. We always hear about the thing of like do something for 40 days and it becomes a habit. That is not really what we know, and I think my experience reflects that, because I was chasing a lot of these things of just do that a bunch.
Yeah, just for listeners,
Yeah,
what's your actual background? So
yeah,
that's theory.
yeah. So I'm a uh, resident psychiatrist, and I focus a lot on um, behavioralism, anxiety, OCD, um, and avoidance and everything. So that's I kind of was not wanting to lead with that, but sure, let's
Yeah.
put it on the
Well, no,
table.
it's helpful
Yeah.
because, like, to your point,
Hmm.
like you see this, you experience it, you've got a lot of insight on this,
Hmm.
right? And yeah, I think it'll keep going on, but that'll
Yeah.
help really land with people that are looking for some insight, like
Yeah,
yours.
for sure, for sure. Um, so yeah, aspects of adult learning theory that I'm trying not to just go because I'm going to take a brief sidebar here. That was part of the issue, right? That was part of the guilt. Is I spend my days trying to get people to make behavioral changes that are causing a very functionally distressing, disconnect in their life. And here I am going home saying it should be like, why can't I just spend 5 minutes, doing this, or why can't I go on a 30-minute walk or something like that? Um, so I feel like a hypocrite in that respect. So that was part of this, right? Is this idea of I don't want to express just what I know from a clinical practice standpoint, but from what I experienced. So that's where these three are coming from. What my experience was with that big win with the hiking trip is for adult learning theory, changes in behavior really need to be focused on a tangible outcome with an intrinsic value. Because if you think about it, you've been doing patterns of behavior for your whole life. As kids, we mimic behaviors. So it's easy for us to pick up things just by mirroring and mimicry and trying new things out. As adults, you've made it as long as you have and you've survived. So there's not a big reason to change the behavior. So you have to have a clear outcome. And I think that's what my thing was really missing. I was working on proxies, on data, tracking and trying to optimize things where it's like the bottom line for me was I needed something that reflected my values. So for me, that was about function, about being able feeling free in my body. And I got that from a hiking trip that really challenged that. Um, and then that's how I've reinforced it is now we go on, a pretty long hike every weekend. Like we've done it the past 2 weekends and then we got some more, coming up. So that's the thing is whatever it is, whatever motivates you, in general, I would focus on the tangible and have check-in points of that. And some people might get intimidated by, oh, I'm going to sign up for a 5K. Maybe that's the thing that drives you, but it doesn't have to be anything that intense. It could just be, hey, I want to play basketball, and whatever, and just like be like, this weekend I'm going to go show up for a pickup game and see how long it takes for me to get winded. So something like that, having an intrinsic goal that you can measure and feel that change with. So that's part one. Part two is accountability, which I am still trying to work on. Early this month, I really got into the Trooper Challenge, and I fell off because of that hiking trip. I kind of went off the grid and wanted to be present there, but that's something I'm really looking forward to doing. And I felt a lot better about myself once I was posting because it it just provides, yeah, like a sense of community, and I think that that's a big strength of this program. And so I think engaging with that and not just waiting and I posted at the very beginning for our initial one that Paul makes super easy. But then I didn't engage after that. And I'd say, don't wait, just go ahead and do it. Everybody's really good and encouraging. So that's a big one. So intrinsic value that you can measure, engaging in community. And then three is like, you know, noticing the when you're making changes in your life, regardless of how far down it is. So for me, I had an expectation of what someone who made fitness a part of their life would look like. And not only just being, physique wise, but just what that life would look like. And I never really felt like that clicked. Like I would always come to Paul and say, I don't feel like I'm doing it every day, but I don't feel it like in there. And that I think is where, don't trust that vision, but just like look at what's happening. Look at the changes. Like, are you working out 3 to 6 times a week now when previously you weren't doing any? Are you like, you know, feeling better like as far as like nutrition goes? Are you like getting more sleep? All that. Like notice those things and like acknowledge the wins because there's a lot of stress in life and like, if you're able to have some control like that in a healthy, positive way, like you're just going to feel better and it's going to drive you forward.
Yeah.
So those are my three.
That's been my big theme lately is just your focus determines your reality. What can I find as a win? How can I spin any I mean, at the end of the day, what I find really interesting is so much of what happens, and then we attach the story to it. So we step on the scale, it gives us a number, and then it's, oh, it went up. That means I'm unlovable because it's always gone up after 2 weeks. Or, oh, the scale went up. That's, maybe a good sign. But it's finding, to your point, little wins where it's like, oh, no, like I've gone 17 times in the last month. Last month, I did 15 times. Like there's a 12% increase. I don't
Hmm.
know what the actual percentage is, but just find those wins because they are there. And then it's just a 1% better every day comparing yourself to yourself
Hmm.
while mixing in grace, which you talked about earlier, but also just kind of this like relentless pursuit of like, okay, I fell down. Cool. I'm going to get back up and try again.
Yeah. Um, I there's there's two things that I like. One is one that I picked up from you, and the other is one that we say in when helping patients who deal with addiction. Um, and it ties that in of like where it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a good metric to judge where is that line between the grace and pushing yourself forward. And you always say like one, not two, where yeah, it's fine. It was one, just don't let it be two. And when I am talking to people who are going through recovery, I tell them that it's a circle, and there's the stages of recovery, and relapse is part of that. So relapse is part of recovery. Um, and even though it's a different sphere than like trying to change habits here, all of it is behavioral change. And so, if you are, drinking heavily 7 days a week and you're cutting back and you're going for, let's even say like you're doing fairly successful and you go 30 days and then you slip up and you have a drink or even drink for a couple days, but then you get back on track. Some people would say like, I'm restarting the clock. I'm restarting from ground zero. And I say, that's not it. You got to look at what's going on. You were drinking all the time and now you had a, you know, 10% of the time, even if you take just that snapshot. And so relapse is part of recovery, one, not two. You know, it doesn't reset the thing. It's just it's still an improvement over where you were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point because it's really easy to get into these binaries, right? Only the Sith deal in absolutes. And
Oh,
it's,
perfect. Perfect. There's a third right there. Only the
yeah,
Sith dealing absolutes. Yeah.
yeah. Where it's like, oh man, I'm not going to have carbs or I'm not going to miss a meal. And it's like, okay, well, there's missing every meal, there's making every meal, and it's not you're good or you're bad. It's what percentage are you moving towards? And the more you zoom out, the more you can actually see that trend line, which is, why it's important to zoom out and not get so locked into the absolutes of it all.
Mhm.
To that point, I'll give you one other curveball. Since you're a woods kind of hike guy, what's your favorite forest in all of Star Wars?
Worst in all of Star Wars. That's a, I
It's a good
mean,
one. I've never asked that.
I know. Yeah. I'm trying to think so like mind immediately goes to Kashyyyk, but I don't feel like that's the answer, you know? I mean, it's epic for what it is. Um,
Well, there's Endor is
there's
another one.
Endor, which is just California, and I'm more of a, uh, uh, Gulf Coast, East Coast kind of guy, so I can't give it to that one. Um, I'm trying to think what else would be there.
The
You know,
forest in the Bad
you,
Batch. There's a
yeah,
that this place.
I'll tell you what it is. Um, because this is what flashed in my mind. I don't remember which episode it was. Spoilers in case that needs to be
In case
thrown out. Yeah, it was spoilers like
anyone.
5 years late. Because I think it was like season 2 of Mandalorian. Um, the the first live action appearance of Ahsoka. And it's kind of that forest that's very I don't remember if they had fire or something, but it was just like kind of like a lot of sticks and it's just a lot. It was very foggy, and it was a really cool. It was very foggy and brown,
Yeah,
and it was a really good contrast to her white lightsabers. And I was just like, that was such a good like reveal in that sense. So I think that force has to take it just for vibes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Good answer. Because
yeah,
yeah, to your point, there's Kashyyyk, there's Endor, but there's a lot of good forests in there. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I guess we covered three keys to success. Any other final words or any other things? Otherwise, we can send you off to that planet. I forget what it's called, but it's a cool planet.
Yeah, no, I'd have to look it up. It yeah, no, I'm on the deal and on the Fitner Academy and just like anything else. So if anybody wants, to talk about any of this, or if they just want somebody to like cheerlead them, like I mean we're all there, but I'm definitely there. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
Cool. Well,
do
dude,
it too,
thanks for
man.
the time. Thanks for sharing your background, your story, and your journey. And I definitely know that a lot of people get some insight from this because you got a really cool perspective.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely.